Currently what I'm working on is Joeyband. It's the third company that I've helped build. This is the first one. I think in the first one I was the 8th employee, second one I was the 4th employee. I wanted to get in at ground level, and so this is one that I've co-founded, which I learned is completely different than being the 4th employee or the 8th employee, which I hadn't anticipated. I thought because I had done that, I'm like, oh yeah, so co-founding will be no problem. But it's incredible. So my co-founder actually invented the product called Joeyband, and it's used for immediate skin-to-skin in the OR postpartum unit, as well as the NICU, and it's also used at home. And so what happens is, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but when babies are born, they're placed immediately on the chest, and there's all these beautiful benefits of skin-to-skin. Like they can rewire dad's brain to bond with baby, they thermoregulate the baby, babies' cortisol levels go down, their brain can grow faster. There's a ton of benefits. And so my co-founder was doing this practice with her child, and her baby startled on her chest and fell to the floor. And so she was like, she was just, in the literally despair, her and her husband took her baby to the hospital, and the doctor looked at her and was like, this happens all the time. So she tried every product on the market, wraps, carriers, slings, baby wearing t-shirts, was like, why isn't there something that can just keep my baby to me safely, easily, securely? And then she came up with the prototype, and then we went on to patent the product internationally. It's used by hospitals across North America, not only for infant fall prevention, but also driving clinical outcomes, like helping to reduce NICU admissions, helping with maternal anxiety. So some really exclusive breastfeeding rates, some really powerful metrics. So yeah, that's currently what we're working on. It's healthcare focused. Yeah. I do most of the front end. So I do all of our sales, business development, some of the marketing, and the sales and business development would include selling directly to hospital. It would include partnerships as well. And then I also do finances as well. I oversee our finances. And then everything else within the company, we share. So I went to Cobequid Educational Center, which is here in Truro. And I think one of the most unique things about it is, I guess, going from small classrooms of 30 and small schools to this massive high school really opened my eyes into just my peers and where everyone was and what interests were, and I think I've also always been interested in observing people, so it was really, really overwhelming for me when I think about it, because there was so much to take in. The sports teams were incredible. I ended up playing basketball through, actually basketball, cross country, track. I even did a bit of softball. So I really liked the Division I component of the school because it was competitive, which was amazing. Incredible coaches as well. In terms of me going through school, I stayed, which is kind of funny, like I stayed in my lane. Like I knew sports and the type of classes that I was interested in, and I didn't really deviate out of that. I look back and I think, oh, I wish I had done some drama, or I wish I had done some art classes like painting, or I wish I had tried the musicals or something, because I did grow up doing some of that stuff in junior high and elementary school. In terms of experience, I had a really happy high school experience. The teachers that I had were fantastic. We actually lived right around, at the time, the football field was in our backyard. At the time, so like we joked about putting a hole in the fence, but we didn't actually. But we would, we'd walk around. Somehow I'd still end up late for class. I have no idea how. I think I get that from my mother. But yeah. So I mean, it was a good experience for me. I had a lot of privilege and luck, I think, in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
At the time, I would have been like, yeah, I'm fully engaged.
Right.
I look back though, and I think I was floating a little bit. Like I think I was engaged, but I wasn't there. I'm one of those individuals where I have to feel really passionate about something. Right. And if I'm not feeling that passion, it's difficult for me. It's difficult for me to give it 100%. And so that wasn't really, that, I guess, experience wasn't really a passion of mine. Like it was, but it was something that I knew at the time that was important, although we see lots of individuals who go to do amazing things who don't have that experience. So, but for my family and the way that we grew up, that was expected. It was important to go do that. And so I leaned in that area, but I didn't study in high school. I didn't learn how to study until I got to university. So it tells me that I wasn't really engaged in, you know, in the classroom. I would answer questions, but I was happy. It was a classic, I would say, textbook high school experience. You know what? It never really did, and I think that's why I struggled to learn how to study too. That was luck that I was able to have good grades and honors with distinction without studying. But it really didn't speak to me. I didn't like the way that we're taught to study. It just wasn't something that worked for me. Right. Yeah. I'm definitely more of a real life experience, understanding type of person versus sitting in a classroom. Yeah. You know, there was experiments and things that would bring that into the classroom as best we could, but it was so robotic. Follow this step, and then this does this, and then this does this, and then whereas I was interested in the why. Why does this do this? And then I would remember something so much more if I could understand the why or the how it interacts or what this means. It was kind of painting a bigger picture for me. Of course. Yeah. So in university, I think I started to realize that I needed a combination of the visual and learning and hearing, but also the writing out. So I actually, you know, when I remember going and purchasing this massive whiteboard that was probably the size of this table, and I would put it in my room in university, and I would draw out all of the different things that I was looking at. And I drew more than I wrote, which was interesting. So I think I started to realize that pictures and images was something that really helped to stick in my memory. But like I said, that for me, so that was more to help memorize. But in terms of actually learning, understanding, getting to the root of something, understanding the why, the how, what this, you know, and that real life dialogue with someone, I really needed, when I think about it, I learn best in conversations where I'm almost one-on-one versus being in a big classroom. And then I also realize that when it's something that I'm passionate about, I learn in a totally different way. It's almost like if I'm passionate about the topic, the learning is much deeper and much care about it and much faster, which is such an interesting thing to observe. But if it's an area that I'm not as passionate about, then it's you know, like I said, it's a lot of drawing and dialogue more so than just one person speaking to me. Perfect. Yeah. I think it was a valuable experience for me. Parts of me wish that there had have been, and this is one way that I think would have actually made a difference for me, more focus on helping students tap into their individuality versus kind of that broad. Yeah, because I really didn't feel like I fit in with that mesh. And I think that's probably what pushed me to float a little bit more and be more introverted. But learning what my skills were that were practical, because I knew I could, I could go try out for the WNBA and I would, you know what I mean? But I knew, even though I was so good at basketball, I was a great player, but I knew that I couldn't really go anywhere with that. Science was not what I was really passionate about, so I didn't feel like I, had anything. So I think actually now, when I look back, really pulling out that individuality in students and and if you're interested in this, let's go explore this, try this course, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus, but as a whole it was, because it was more the lessons like within, it was actually more the social lessons, I feel like, sometimes than the actual academic lessons, like trying out for a basketball team, trying out for doing a run and not being happy with the result or feeling like I was failing at something. It was more that experience with a ton of other peers that I think was probably the most valuable for me.
Right.
Yeah. And I say this, like a lot of my skills actually I got from the basketball court.
Right.
And skills that I wouldn't even anticipate came from the basketball court, like being in a meeting and being very aware of everyone in the room and who's responding to what I'm saying and who's not responding to what I'm saying. That came from basketball because I always had to use my peripherals and I had to watch people on the court. So like little things like that you wouldn't even anticipate that would help you in business and in whatever I'm doing now. But the things that I think didn't help really would have been that individuality piece and you know, someone really sitting down with you when you go and saying, what do you like? Who are you as a person?
Yeah.
What are your interests? Do you know what you want to do? Because when I went through, if you were smart, you took science. And if you weren't, you didn't. And you didn't know what else to take.
There weren't very many options.
There weren't very many options. And even if they weren't there, they weren't, even if they were there, they weren't promoted the way that they could have been. And then I think the other thing that would have been really helpful is, and I think this is helpful whether you're a high performer or not, is teaching practices around like self-compassion and empathy and learning different skills that you would actually really use outside. Yeah, like courses on empathy and relationships and how to treat yourself kindly, how to speak to yourself kindly, because you know, by the time we get into high school, we're all operating off of whatever stories we've been telling ourselves for X amount of years. But that's where you're really starting to build an identity, but you're usually doing it with the people around you versus, you know, who you actually are. I think when you're going through school and classes, like you're asking yourself, why does this happen in this example? What does this mean? Like, so you're starting to practice critical thought. So I would say in that generic way, they all helped. Like, that's, you know, but in terms of like, are you really glad you took that calculus course because in business, you know, no, not really. Like, not really, but it was more like the structure, the concept of high school where I learned the lessons versus
the actual like courses.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite classes was English, and which is not something that typically I would think would come to mind because I never read the books. Right. Honestly, I never did, and I'm so sorry if my teacher then always like sees this. I never read the books. I read the Coles notes, but I loved her class, and I felt like I kind of thrived in her class. But it was still challenging. And even though I had exceptional teachers, like there were really great teachers going through at that time, everything in her classroom was a dialogue. And so that, again, now that I'm connecting the dots, even sitting here, like I'm going back to that. I loved that extroverted conversational side. And so she would ask questions for the class and we would talk about it. And, you know, some viewpoints were so different. I found that really intellectually stimulating. For me, that was more intellectually stimulating than going, look at this proton and neutron. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where some people prefer that. So I loved the way that she approached the class. She was really approachable as an individual. She was really invested in the class. She had a beautiful way of building you up and then encouraging you to also take that next step individually. Right. Like even the way she would mark my papers, I remember I was never felt disappointed, because she was always so encouraging, but would hold you to a good standard or a high standard. So I really enjoyed her classes. So this is going to sound so silly, but it's something that so my new favorite word, well, it's been my favorite word, I guess, for a couple of years now, is practice. Practice. So whenever I'm doing something, I say I'm practicing that. So practice failing. And it sounds so silly, but I think literally like setting a scenario where you can't succeed in it, right. and doing it in a classroom. And because what you're doing is you're teaching students, and learning how to fail is probably one of the most important life skills to have. Learning how to fail means you can have a softer landing. It means you can get back up. It means you can still speak to yourself kindly. It means you're still confident. But we don't teach people how to fail. We teach them how to succeed. And so I think that practicing that skill, so a friend of mine, she's an entrepreneur, she has empathy toys that are designed for children that literally teach the child how to fail so that they can't complete the toy, or the task at hand, and they can't maneuver the toy, because it is such an important lesson. So I think that's a big one. And then I go to the softer skills, especially, in an era with something like social media. We are all finding our individuality. A lot of it is through tech, but I think the real change happens when we're able to have conversations with each other, understand how to have healthy dialogue in conflict. That is such an important life skill that would be used in every capacity, right. But especially too in something like business, because you bring 5 people to a table, chances are that everyone agrees the exact same. Well, first of all, that wouldn't be the right table because you don't want that. But second of all, how do you navigate that? How do you be uncomfortable with something and still ask questions respectfully and kindly while still asserting boundaries? These are some more of those skills. So like I said, failure, empathy, collaboration, conflict, navigating those scenarios. Those are really good things to have in terms of entrepreneurship. And then, but I find we tend to focus on financial modeling or how to do a presentation, and that stuff is great too. Don't get me wrong, but and also I think one of the really important things, because I see so many entrepreneurs, and there's different things that make people passionate, but helping to cultivate passion. So if you had an exercise, for instance, where you had an entrepreneur talking about something that they were incredibly passionate about, and you had them do that for 5 or 10 minutes in a class, and then the next day, next week, whatever, you gave them a topic that they had zero interest in, that they weren't passionate about, how does their body language change? What types of, how is the story communicated when they're passionate versus when they're not passionate? But the reason I say that that's an important skill to learn is because it teaches the individual, with the feedback from the class, follow your passions. Follow what you're actually interested in. Here's how your body language totally changed. And so you start to learn that for yourself. Whereas there's so many different ways. Some people know, some people don't. But I think that something like that is a great exercise to start to cultivate within young entrepreneurs. You know what? I'm honestly not sure. What I would love for that question is for entrepreneurial folks to get in a room and whiteboard it, and see what it looks like, and dream about what it looks like. I know that it's not conventional. I know that it's outside of the classroom. It's and when you're in the classroom, it's not seated at desks. I know that it includes spontaneity. I know that it includes failure. I know that it includes wins and success. I know that it includes that fundamental component of collaboration, but also that sense of self. I don't know. I don't know, but I think that there's a lot of components, but how you structure that. I think the design, everything from the design and the layout of how we sit in a classroom would have to be totally different, which would be interesting to see how people respond. Like you think of our physical spaces and the way that we respond.
Typical,
Like you think of how we respond and interact to that. You know, you sit down in your desk and immediately you're like this.
Right.
Like even that body language, right?
Yeah.
Like, so what does it mean to, how do we change that? So I don't know. Yeah.